Welcome to the Innovator's Playbook podcast. I am your host, Seth Narayanan, founder and CEO of Telliant Systems. Each week, I'll be sitting down with entrepreneurs, product leaders, and technologists who are solving real world problems with bold ideas and smart execution. We will dig into what is working, what's not, and the lessons they have learned turning vision into reality. If you're leading digital transformation, scaling a startup, or just curious how innovation really happens behind the scenes, this is your playbook. Let's get started. Welcome, everybody, to the Innovators Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Seth Narayanan, founder and CEO of Telliant Systems. I'm very excited to have Parker Sipes, CTO and president of Annihilare, joining me in the podcast today. Parker has a background in engineering, in product development, and strategic management, and enjoys working on projects that involve bringing new ideas to life or improving existing systems for greater impact. As you learn about his company, you will realize the amount of innovation that he has done. Really excited to have him today. Parker has worked across various industries, collaborating with teams to design and implement sustainable, innovative solutions that address real-world challenges. Whether it's advancing technology, optimizing processes, or exploring new opportunities, Parker's focus is on solutions that balance creativity, functionality, and long-term value. Parker, welcome to the Innovators Playbook podcast.
Seth, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Parker, why don't we get started? Maybe you can give the viewers a little bit of background on where your journey started, how you ended up being the CTO and president of Annihilare.
There's quite a bit to unpack, even though I am a pretty young guy, but I did start out actually in the music industry prior to being in the technology space. And that was a short career through high school and a little bit of college. And at the end of the day, I decided I wanted to get out of the music space and get into something a little bit more stable. And then it goes to show you how little I knew about that because I dove right into entrepreneurship, which the joke was on me. In 2013, I got invited into an opportunity to be in this fancy sounding new chemical called hypochlorous acid, which is a safe, sustainable disinfectant. And it was straight out of a garage, just like every story that you hear. And it's evolved from there. So I'd be happy to unpack that with any questions specifically.
Yeah, no, you sound like you are a true innovator and maybe a scientist mixing up solutions and whatnot. So that's a great intro. So, why specifically that problem? I know you have a background in music, and I think you also have a degree in engineering or computer science. And why did that little problem really get your attention?
I wish I could have a straight answer for that. I think at the time I really didn't know the industry at all. I knew nothing about the industry. I think it was more of a call to adventure, the same call to adventure that I had to try to do something great in the music space. But for me, it was interesting because I'd never heard of anything like it. And when you think of the chemical space, it's very legacy driven. It's very old school, very toxic products. And the space that we're in is regulated by FIFRA, which is the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, which
Hmm.
is way back into the 70s in the Nixon era, right, where it was written on a typewriter. So there's not a lot of innovation in that space. So it was very new and novel for me when it was introduced. And honestly, I wanted to do something great, and this seemed like the ground floor to do so. Fast forward 13 years involved in that with doing some other things on the side as we're incubating the idea for the first few years. I learned a lot, made every mistake at least once, some mistakes twice, and at the end of the day, you learn from that. And I think that pressure cooker has given me the ability to have a lot of skills to increase my batting average over my peers that are probably similar age that were in their comfortable corporate spaces.
Yeah, definitely. It takes a certain mindset to be an innovator and a risk taker. Obviously, there is a lot of chemistry involved here. Are you a good chemistry student growing up? Is that
I
a
think the same thing with music lessons, right? And when I went into music lessons, I hated it. I didn't really care for the actual formality of it. And same thing with school. I was actually a late bloomer. With high school, I did well, but I never studied for anything, right? It was always one of those things to where I was more interested in what was directly in front of me and not really paying attention to my future. But it was only after I got into this opportunity where you started to demystify things, where okay, if you just understood the first principles of how something was put together, you can really open up a new world of possibilities when you design new products. And for me, that sort of became the bug that bit me. And
Mhm.
from there, a couple of college degrees, I'm always reading books, I'm always learning more. I have this raging curiosity that seems to just exponentially grow. And with that, I use that same sort of approach to address problems, especially when it comes to designing new systems for what we do here.
Yeah. Although your industry is in cleaning and in chemicals and making it safe, but you're also still leveraging technology in your business to advance your company and how you serve your customers. Talk a little bit about how do you marry the two and why do you think that's important?
Our CEO comes from a technology background, and I come from a technology background. So we always originally presented ourselves and promoted ourselves as a technology company in the chemical space. So by doing that, it allowed us to look at it from a fresh set of eyes rather than let's blend some toxic colored solutions and put it in a bottle and then go and market it, right?
Yeah.
It's a heavily regulated space, but when you look at it through a technology perspective, you try to come at it with that fancier lens to try to address things in a more systematic way rather than just doing what everyone else did. This business is very slow moving,
Yeah.
which does pose its challenges. But at the end of the day, if you can come up with some creative solutions, especially ancillary technology solutions through software and through solid business models using innovative advanced tech,
Yeah.
then that can make things a little easier when it comes to differentiating yourself.
Yeah. I read yesterday that the NVIDIA CEO Jensen said that the next frontier in AI is robots, right? So, do you foresee a day when there would be robots walking around spraying chemicals instead of people bringing their trucks? Do you see a lot of avenue for robotics in the space?
It's already here. It's been here for several years. There's several companies, especially in the floor scrubber space, where they'll use LiDAR technology and cameras. Think of the robo vacuums, right?
Yeah.
It's the same tech, except they're using that to apply products and floor scrub to have the unmanned vehicles go down the third shifts in airports and things like that. So it's already here. And what's interesting, I love hearing CEOs of tech companies say that their product is going to be used for many years to keep that stock price up, right?
That's what crossed my mind when he said that is maybe are we running into a situation where he needs newer markets for his chips and maybe that's where he's planting that idea. But yeah, that's good observation. So you mentioned your interest in music. I do want to touch on it a little bit. Tell me again a little bit about what is it that got you into music and maybe also what got you out of it eventually. Why didn't you
Well,
become a rock star with the long hair and
yeah. Yeah, if I didn't have my grandfather's hairline, I'd probably still have long hair. But anyway, as my wife said, I got a real job and cut my hair. But it was a serious thing for me for a while. I was going through high school, then college, and it was something I really wanted to do. And I sought out to do it with excellence. And I actually got pretty far in that space, relatively speaking. We toured, I
yeah,
did 7 studio albums, including mine, as well as being on other people's albums. And I was on the Trans-Siberian Orchestra
yeah.
2015 Letters for the Labyrinth album. So I got to participate on that, which was really fun. So I got to do a lot of experiences that a lot of people in bands and in the music industry didn't get to do. So I was definitely grateful for that. But around 2013 was when we recorded that for the 2015 release. And that was around the same time that I transitioned into this opportunity in its really early years.
Yeah.
And I played part-time in a church as a music director, worship leader there, which was where I met my wife. And so music is very much still a part of my life, even though I don't perform
Right.
anymore. But it's definitely an in tandem, parallel sort of thing in conjunction with the tech. And there's a ton of technology in the music space. So it's not like it's completely divergent.
Yeah. No, that's so true. You still have music in your life and as a passion. And so probably not making it your living is probably in a way better in that you can enjoy the music more. And whereas if that becomes your life, I don't know, maybe you'll enjoy it, but that's also, it's like for me, I relate that to golf. I love golf and I like to go whenever I can go hit golf balls. And then I watch a lot of the PGA and LPGA and all that. And I look at them and say, I wish I could have been a golfer But then that, I don't know if I would have really enjoyed being a professional golfer as much if I had to play golf for a living. Maybe if I was Tiger Woods, I would, but
I think if you swing the club 200,000 times like they do, you probably have a different perspective. And I think you hit it right on the money there. When you play enough clubs till 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, that lifestyle tends to burn out pretty quickly, unless that's just who you were born to be. And some of the guys that I played with, that's who they were born to be. And I really admire and respect that. So
yeah,
for me, I wanted to do something meaningful and I wanted to do it with the curiosity and the ability to figure things out, which was always the industrious grit that I had.
yeah,
But I didn't necessarily want to do it in that particular manner. So that's why I shifted my focus a little bit.
yeah. The title of this podcast is The Innovator's Playbook. And the reason I chose that is I was always fascinated by innovators and innovation. I know it's a buzzword and people can turn their ears off, but I really think it's crucial that the innovation engine keeps going. And I think that's what America and a lot of the countries that have entrepreneurs make a big difference to their lifestyle and how things have become so convenient and things that we couldn't have imagined even 30, 40, 50 years ago have become products and services that we use every day and make our life so much better. So I want to kind of unpack that a little bit with you on how does, innovation work in your company and how do you make sure that your team continues that innovative strategies that you started your journey with. So maybe talk a little bit about how innovation is practiced in Annihilare.
I love that you started it out by saying it's a buzzword because I think innovation can definitely become a four-letter word, right? Especially when people tend to model themselves as innovators. For me, I'm always reluctant to consider myself an innovator, but I'm constantly in a state of refactor in my personal life. And then we try to translate that to the team as well. Because when you learn things, you gather feedback from customers, have those palm to the forehead moments, that I say all the time, those happy accidents, and then you have those eureka moments that you have to somehow get it into the fold in a meaningful way to where you can start adding value to your customers.
Yeah.
And the way I see that, whether I'm mentoring engineering teams through the university connection that I have, or I'm doing our own team internally, is if you set yourself out to be an innovator, I think you've already missed the point. Really, you want to try to add value,
Mhm.
sometimes in a boring way. And
Yeah.
in my opinion, innovation or to be an innovator, that's a title that's bestowed on you by the market after you've survived long enough to provide enough value. So think of Steve Jobs or Bill Gates, for example. And I think of those, the term survivability bias comes to mind when I think of that.
Yeah.
You wouldn't model your career off of those guys if it wasn't for the fact that they were famous and they were successful.
That's so
If you
true. Yeah.
if you think about that, right? Being high school or college dropouts, Jobs was fired from Apple, I
Yeah.
think in the 80s, and then rehired 10 years later when they bought Next, I believe, his computer company.
That's right.
I think we probably, from a grand scheme, as the great innovator, not to disparage him at all, because he's obviously an amazing innovator. I think the release of the iPhone, what was it, '07? That was like
Yeah.
his
Yeah.
most notorious sort of where he got all of his notoriety. So you think about that, the Elon Musks, the Gates, all of these guys. I think there's a book called Outliers. Was it Gladwell that wrote that book?
Oh, Malcolm Gladwell. Yeah, I love that guy. Yeah.
And it's interesting. So I try to capture that in my own mind. It's like, how can we provide enough value to the customer to solve the problem that they have, right? If you make their Tuesday afternoon a
Hmm.
headache, I don't care how fancy your solution is, it's not innovative.
Yeah.
So, with that being said, here's a practical example. When we started out with our systems, we had a ton of PLCs and computer logic and all of these if then then that chemical measurement and TDS monitors. And a lot of that's really great. And we still use that with our industrial side. But when you're putting this in a supply closet in an airport in Phoenix, Arizona,
Hmm.
it needs to be like a Mr. Coffee Pot. It needs to just turn on and make product.
Just press the button
Press
and
the button.
yeah.
And so when you do that, you tend to address the needs of the customer rather than trying to impress an investor deck to say how cool your tech is.
Yeah.
So it's just modeling and fitting the problem, the solution to the problem itself, and then figuring out what works for that specific customer base, and then pivoting and making changes as you get more data.
Yeah. That's so true. You mentioned coffee. I'm a very avid coffee drinker. About 3 or 4 years ago, my son gifted me and my wife this coffee maker from Philips. and it's a espresso coffee maker. And previously, when we used to make espresso, you would put those grounds in there, and then you have that little thing through which the hot water comes through. But this is one of those devices which is everything is fully automatic, and you just have to press like what type of coffee you want and how much, and it grinds everything in the and compresses it, puts it in that little thing, and then it has a little waste area. So the whole thing is automatic, and it takes about 2 minutes to make a perfect cup of espresso or cappuccino. And I love that machine to death, so much so that I'm going to get one here for the office as well. And talking about innovation, making coffee has become an area. And then I went and started looking at other coffee machines. There are so many out there that have made this thing so easy to make with perfect quality and whatnot. So innovation doesn't have to be, like you said, something that's revolutionary, right? Those small marginal improvements, continuous improvement is what I think the Japanese call it with their Toyota quality program is continuously innovating is what makes a product over time or a set of products over time that much better. So
You can look the Kaizen method or something like that.
yeah, exactly. I think I'm trying to, is it Deming that
Yeah, the Deming, was it the five things that he does or suggests to do that? Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, you can get very complicated with that, but the root of it is continuously improving, whether it is the product itself or also on the business model, on the culture. It's that the always looking for small improvements that will continue to make whatever you're doing better. Isn't that, would you agree that is the core of innovation? You can have leaps. You can wake up one morning and kind of totally change your product to do something. Those leaps are needed as well, but having those continuous ongoing improvements are also part of innovation.
I agree 100%. I think it's the way I see it, to reframe what you just said, it's to reduce friction as much as possible to get it to the customer in a more meaningful way. So it could be something as simple as switching a metal part for a plastic part. And that would be the one thing that makes the coffee pot work that much better to where everyone adopts it and loves it.
Yeah.
In anticipation of our conversation today, I had never looked up the word innovation in the dictionary to actually see what the definition was
Yeah.
when I saw the Innovator's Playbook.
Yeah,
And
you
so
should tell me because I don't think I did that.
well, and I'll probably butcher it, but it's very simple and it's pretty much just to create something new, right? When you think of innovation, we always think of something new and something cleverly new, right? Something that isn't as obvious.
Yeah.
And I think in many ways we tend to still want to gravitate towards that type of thing when we think of innovator or innovation. But really,
Mhm.
it's just to create something new. Like you said, take something like coffee or chemicals
Yeah.
and to
Yeah.
slightly tweak it in a way that just makes it that much better. And for us, we're in a completely emerging market. I've talked about the chemicals, but it's not really just the chemistry that we do. And I'm happy to talk about the science just to help the listeners out to know exactly what it is that we do.
Yeah.
But it's the delivery methods that we do, as well as the supporting technology around it. I think that's what we would consider, if anything, the innovative emerging tech part of it.
That's a topic that I want to get into it a little bit with you is tell us and the audience about the core innovation of your product, plus what other innovative techniques you're using in delivering the service or the solution to your customers that makes Annihilare a unique or innovative solution that it is. That when I first talked to you, I was like, wow, that is, you are a true innovator. And so maybe expand on the full product, what it does and how it gets delivered, and you solve the customer's problem.
Sure, I appreciate that. And at the end of the day, though, it's a team effort and the group of partners we have, as well as all of our team members. That's certainly where all of the credit should go because everyone works hard every day to bring the vision alive to something meaningful to our customers. But basically, at the end of the day, what we do is essentially you can think of it as three things, but it's all based around the same chemistry. And the chemistry, it sounds scary at first, but it's actually really not. And I'll explain. So the term is hypochlorous acid. So hypo meaning less than,
Mhm.
chlorous meaning chlorine. And so it's a weak acid form of a weak chlorine species. So the way we make that is through electrochemistry. And believe it
Okay.
or not, before I go there, our bodies, in all mammals, our bodies make it in our white blood cells as part of our immune system. But our bodies make it through enzyme reactions. So what we do is we leverage 19th century technology going all the way back to Michael Faraday. When you
Mhm.
think of all of those innovators back then, discovering all of the Ohm's laws of the world that we
Yeah,
still
I'm
live with.
a electrical engineer and I love Faraday's. Is it right hand rule or left hand rule?
Yeah, the magnetic flux.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And so we use electrochemistry to do it in an industrial way. And so the way that is, I say the best analog that people can get their heads around is, say, a saltwater pool. So we
Hmm.
take salt water and we have sodium chloride, and then we basically reassemble those elements to form hypochlorous and a sodium hydroxide cleaner degreaser just by using salt water and electrochemistry. So the best way to think of that would be a battery uses chemicals
Hmm.
to create electron flow and
Right.
write the differences in chemicals through redox reactions. And so we just flip that on its head and we apply electricity to a set of known chemicals to change the chemical state. So
Hmm.
you can take something as inert as salt water and to make it into extremely potent but still safe disinfectants and cleaners.
Very cool. You know what? After you retire from this business and sell it, I want you to do something on the swimming pools you mentioned because we have a pool in our backyard and it's a chlorine pool. It's not a salt pool. But the amount of struggle that we go through to maintain the chemistry on that pool, you
Mhm.
believe every time there is rain or there's some kind of thing, the pool chemistry goes wacky off, and then I got to run to the pool shop and they run the test and so I just added all these chemicals and they ask you to dump like 50 pounds of this and 70 pounds of that. And sometimes you have to empty the pool. It's like, that's got to be some solution where I can automate this whole thing. Right? Maybe that is.
Yeah, there are tons of automations out there. And again, electrochemistry is in the saltwater pool process, right? You pour a big bag of salt in your pool and it runs it through an electrolytic cell and then makes the chlorine and the sodium hydroxide right there in the pool. So the only thing you have to do at that point is just buffer your pH to make sure it's safe enough to swim. But
So would you
yeah,
recommend converting to a salt pool?
yeah, but
Is it
do your
not?
research. Yeah, I could direct you. So we actually have some competitors in our space that do something similar to what we do, but they dominate the pool market where we're not even in the pool market at all, but it's
Yeah.
very similar tech.
You guys should look into it. There's a lot of money to be made. I can tell you that. That's
Yeah.
somebody that spends a lot of money on pools. But anyway, so that's really interesting. And tell me a little bit about the delivery side of it, right? So,
Sure. So we partner with larger brands to be like the Intel chip, so to speak, right? Where we put our chemical and our manufacturing process and our EPA registrations and all of that into their bottle because
yeah,
we don't want to spend the millions and millions of dollars that it takes in order to get on a shelf and to actually have some pull through from the consumer side. So we partner with retail brands so that you can go to Target and Walmart and buy the product and benefit from it. And that's ramping up as we speak on those shelves. But I say the real emerging tech innovative side that we do is we also have an on-site generation tool where you can install a piece of equipment in a custodial closet, as I mentioned earlier, the Mr. Coffee analogy, where it's a piece of equipment. Think of like a water heater, think of a piece of HVAC equipment or something where you actually physically install it. You hook it up to water, plug it into a 120 circuit, and you put water softener crystals in a tank and it generates all the chemicals that you need to run an airport, to run a school, to run an office building or a hospital. And we
mm,
have those all over the country. And if you think of during the pandemic, the supply chains were shut off. Okay. One of the big benefits of that is that if you have running water and electricity and water softener salt, which you can buy at any Home Depot or Lowe's, you have all the chemistry you need generated on site. So now
yeah,
you're freeing up space for all of your supplies in your supply house. You're not buying these big pallets of syrups that you put in your dilution control stations. And you've got a safer product. So occupational safety is you've got a check mark on that, but you're
right.
not sacrificing efficacy. And I think that's the biggest thing for us is because for a while we would lead with the sustainable safety factor of this new chemical that was safe. But when people heard green and safe, they heard it doesn't work as well.
What kind of compromise do I have to make for that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for us, we learned that pretty quickly. And that was a way for us to start the conversation in a meaningful way with our customer by saying, hey, listen, this is a new chemical is just as effective. And here's all the data points. Here's all the documentation, all of the Boy Scout badges that you need to know that it's there, right?
Yeah.
And then from there, oh, by the way, you have a sustainability initiative at your university, or oh, by the way, you want to increase your occupational safety score by reducing the risk and exposure you have for your staff. This is a way to do that because it's essentially non-toxic.
So the real value is how simple and how easy it is to implement and how safe it is, right?
It's the closest thing to a natural process for a disinfectant if you think about it. Every time lightning strikes the ocean, it converts the salt water into hypochlorous. Our bodies make it through enzymes. As I mentioned, it's a very complicated process, but it's super fascinating. It's not 100% natural in the sense that there are no hypochlorous acid rivers that you can just stick a bottle in and capture it. But
Yeah,
at the same time, it is a natural process that does occur in nature.
yeah.
It's very fascinating. But the third element to all of that is you've got the bottles. So you can buy it in the retail space. If you can't justify a spend over a certain amount of dollar amount, you're just buying a bottle or two per month to clean your home with. We've
Hmm.
got that covered there. The on-site generator, we have different sizes, different models to fit the need based upon the volume that the customer needs for their floor scrubbers, their mop buckets, their spray bottles, and their dispenser systems, whatever they need.
Yeah.
And then above and beyond that, we have a software as a service and IoT capabilities that we can include with that. And that's how we lead in from the technology perspective to be able to support our customers and to be able to provide a tech solution that's in addition to the better chemistry.
Yeah, that's very important so that the managers and people that who need a way to measure the value that they are getting out of this, kind of having that software dashboards and the ability to monitor that is so important, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of our customers don't use the IoT portion because if you think about it, if you're next to a radiology room in a hospital or you're in a basement somewhere, whether you're getting LTE connection or Wi-Fi, if you're lucky enough to surpass the gatekeeping of an IT department's rules and regulations, then, you're lucky enough to be able to do that. But a lot of times they just want the box that turns on and makes the product, but then they can use the software tool, the SaaS solution with it. But so
Hmm.
some customers like the IoT and the data that comes off of it, and some customers just like the Mr. Coffee method.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. Yeah, I think I like the way you guys have merged old tech in a way, legacy tech to modern technology, and we cannot get away from all this without talking about AI. So it's everywhere. How do you see that impacting or helping your business? Is it just you can maybe make Annihilare.ai and call yourself an AI company, or is there anything specific that you guys are working on?
It's funny. It's actually an inside joke that we use all the time. Is maybe if we change it to .com to .ai, the whole
Yeah.
world will just blow up and really adopt it overnight. It's just the subtle changes with the bandwagon.
Yep.
For me, as you mentioned, I do have a computer science degree by education, so I'm obviously an advocate of the tech behind AI. But for me, I don't go to a new restaurant for the first 6 months because it's new, it's
Yeah.
noisy, they're still figuring
I'm
things
with you
out.
100%. And a lot of them don't make it past.
And so, for that reason, I tend to apply that same philosophy to tech trends. And I don't, at any way, shape, or form, say that AI is a trend because I think everyone knows AI because of GPT's release a couple years ago in 2022. But AI has been around since the 50s, right?
Yeah.
If you think of the classification models and the perceptron and everything that led up to that, and I was doing stuff in school where I was deep learning with neural nets and classification models and an XGBoost with
Yeah.
machine learning using Python and R long before LLMs and chatbots came out. So it's definitely something that's going to continue to progress. Billions and billions of dollars are being invested in it.
Yeah.
I say all of that sort of in a rambling fashion, but hopefully there's some consistency to it that we want to apply that same thought process to our space. Yes, we use AI and we use machine learning to drive our R&D. We've done it for years. We've been applying that to all of our chemical analysis for support, for storage stability, for developing intellectual property around some of our systems for our on-site generators. We've been
Mhm.
using that long before the chat LLMs came out. I think I mentioned to you in a previous conversation a project that I'm working on now is I'm developing a RAG tool, a retrieval
Right.
augmented generation tool. So I can basically chunk all of our PDFs, all of our schematics, all of our documentation into an open source tool, whether it be Olama or if we decide to use an API through GPT or something, to be able to develop that central knowledge base that we would keep internal to our technicians and our engineers so that we can just keep building on the knowledge base and then have that as a hub to go back to and ask questions that are above and beyond a particular tech's knowledge as a more of a training tool than anything else. I think there are a lot of meaningful things that are going to come from AI. I think most of the buzz and the hype that you see are just GPT wrappers, chatbots that are industry specific.
Yep.
And so what we don't want to do is jump on that gold rush and that siren song, so to speak, and then crash into the rocks like I think a lot of companies do.
Yeah. What about code generation? Are you starting to use any of the Copilot type code generation tools?
I haven't used Cursor yet personally. I've used some Claude
Okay.
for some SaaS development. Very interesting. I've noticed personally that it's still at the moment very robust.
Yeah.
Very robust in the sense that maybe that's not the term I wanted to use. Maybe verbose was the term I wanted to use. I'll take a file and I'll drop it in and I say, "Hey, can you tweak this?" and give it a prompt.
Yeah.
And even if I clean up the prompt, it'll give me 2,000 lines of code beautifully executed. And then I'll say, "Why don't you just do it this way? It would only take 5 lines of code." Right.
Yeah.
So then it'll say, "Oh, yeah, you're absolutely right." Give me that people pleasing response. And that's where I tend to pause a little bit with just blindly copying the vibe
Yeah.
code that's out there right now, where you can be a product manager or an entrepreneur or someone and vibe code your way to a minimal viable product or a demo at least.
Yeah.
And then the moment you hit a brick wall, you can't dig yourself out.
Yeah. Now that's an interesting thing you said because you're right. Whatever prompt or question I've been asking any of these AI tools, the answer is always yes. And it just makes you nervous a little bit. I don't know if they should it maybe occasionally come back to me and say, no, let's not do that because for these reasons. Maybe kind of because that's the direction you want it to go is if your AI bot is going to be your assistant or somebody that actually is sitting next to you as a person, then you want that person to kind of have a dialogue with you and say maybe no to things that you shouldn't be doing.
Sure, especially when there's accountability, right? Because it is an
Yeah.
AI agent, and an agent is someone that you could be legally responsible for, right?
Yeah.
The fact that they call it an agent is a little nerve-wracking to me because when we have agents that do work, whether it's patent agents or whether it's agents for our regulatory side, those people they're tied to us legally. So I just want to
Yeah.
make sure I'm
Yeah.
not just
Yeah.
sending some nebulous bot out there to send an email that's going to come back and bite me later.
Yeah. Now, the amount of stuff that can get done is really impressive and scary. At the same time, how good they are, and can I just take it and use it as is, or maybe there is some bug down in there that is going to show up. And it's just, I think we are going to get to a point where all of this is going to work and work well, including robo taxis and whatnot. And it is a scary world out there on what it can be. So, do you think about that and be concerned, or are you excited?
I think the entrepreneur is going to be someone that's going to bubble up where I envision a future to where you'll have a tech CEO, startup founder, and a bunch of AI agents, and they develop a solution, right? Where there's going to be that potentially. And then I would maybe recommend everyone get their plumber and electrical contracting license. And I say that in jest, but I
Yeah.
also say that in a serious tone too, because I grew up, my family, they were in the trades, right? My uncle and my father, before he passed, they were in the trades. So there's a lot of, grew up climbing under houses and hooking up receptacles and hooking up connections. So there's a lot of value to that because not a lot of people do that.
Yeah.
But it's going to be one or the two because I feel like in today's world, we have a very small C level at all these major corporations, and then it gets really fat in the middle to all
Hmm.
the middle management, and then funnels down to a small group of people that didn't want to be in that MBA level corporate world
Yeah.
in middle management. Where AI, I feel like it's going to create the hourglass, where it's going to
Hmm.
suck out the middle because all the knowledge work is going to be something that's
Yeah.
what repetitive. It's not going to sleep the performance expectations that you have for a person that's easy to do with an AI tool, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, I can sit here and predict all day long. We'll never know what's going to happen, but
Yeah.
unless you're in a highly regulated gatekeeping space or you're in a space where you physically have to turn a screwdriver, AI could potentially come for you. It's not just developers.
Yeah. Got me to thinking about leadership in today's world, right? What is you lead a team, and what are your core leadership principles that you have over the years learned and apply when dealing with the teams?
I think for me, I value attitude, and that may not seem very mind blowing, but I value attitude over skill because skill is in depending on the role, skill
Mhm.
is implied, right? That's table stakes. You if you're
Skill is the entry,
yeah,
is the
you
minimum
know,
barrier. Yeah.
if you're applying for a coding job or a technician job or you're applying for an accounting job, right? The expectation is that you have some base understanding of those roles. But attitude is so important because you can teach the specific skills. I don't care if you graduated from MIT with honors in mechanical engineering. The moment you go to work for GE as a mechanical engineer or electrical engineer, you're
Mm.
going to have to learn what they do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then if you left 5 years later and you go to work for Lockheed Martin or Boeing or whomever it may be, you're going to have to learn what they do.
Yeah.
So if you have a good attitude, I think that's a good transferable skill. So that's what we look for. Someone who's willing to close tickets, someone who's willing to learn, someone who's willing to do what it takes to deal with the dynamic nature of what a company is, rather than someone who has this sort of unrealistic expectation that that everything's going to be perfect and they need to be catered to. So
Mm.
attitude over skill is important for me. Now, I will cut out some caveats there, right? If my heart surgeon or my litigator, I want them to have a really egotistical attitude because that has some correlation with their skill, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so that to me, for a teammate or someone that's working with us, I think it's important to have a great person that you want to work with every day.
No, that's well said. I think I agree with that a lot as well. The skills are needed, yes, but at the end of the day, you want somebody that you enjoy working with and that is kind of understands the true value of in our business we are all about customer service, right? So you want to make sure that they think of it as their role or their job is to make our customers happy and satisfied, and going that extra step and being a nice person to work with is very important. One other question I have for you, I was as I was looking through your background, you've got 4 patents, I think,
I
right?
do, yes. Yeah, technically, if you looked into it, it's two issued and two pending.
Okay, gotcha. So that's pretty impressive. So tell us a little bit about what those patents are you, and that's related to the chemistry of your products,
It
right?
is, yeah, it is. In the patent world, you're able to, you can get, if you patent the wheel, that's the novel one that everyone wants. Telecommunications in general, right? You want that
Yeah.
one, the very first, but hardly any one of the millions of patents that are out there, whatever the number is. Most of it's improvement over the prior art, right? So you want to find a way to differentiate yourself. But the patents, though, we have at Annihilare, we have a total of 8 pieces of IP. So 5 of which are issued and 3 of which are pending, including 2 of the ones that I just mentioned. But they're
Okay.
all related to what we do. So 5 of them, 4 of them are software related, tech related, RFID, GPS, NFC tracking, optical character recognition. A lot of that software as
Cool.
a service that I mentioned that's on top of that. Dealing with the facilities management, engaging with tags, taking images, capturing GPS. All
Yeah.
of that's baked into a combination of a couple things. One is tracking the effective life cycle of the chemistry to make
Mm.
sure that the chemical is good when you go into a hospital room is very important, very crucial,
Yeah.
as well as knowing how long the person was in the room, making sure that they were in the specific room that they claim that they were in, just having that level of assurance and quality assurance to be able to funnel into a dashboard that someone can trust. So
Yeah.
that's part of that IP. And one of them is around the actual chemical makeup of itself with our generators, how to
Yeah.
make sure that the amperages are perfect, how to make sure that the chemical parts per million is good, to make sure that the machine has safety functions to shut down if the environment is not optimal. All of that was baked into it. So that's more of an electrochemical, electrical engineering type patent. And then the other 2 that I have are based upon the rack system that supports it, which I have a multifunctional rack that is more of a mechanical engineering feat that we did because I try to look at everything through a lean lens where when we were a couple years ago building these things out, we would have version 1.1, 1.1.1.5, right? We would have that version of the rack sitting in the warehouse. And I'm like, we have all of this extra inventory that we're going to have to find a way to repurpose and move.
Yeah.
Where if you can just develop something that it works for one system, you flip it 180 degrees, it works for another system. You add this attachment to it that basically you can put 100 of them in a box this big. That makes it a little bit more lean and capable of moving the inventory so you don't have any waste
Yeah.
and have to send the customer out something that you had to modify in real time in order to get it out the door. So that's what that patent was about.
Very cool. Now, if anybody had any doubts, if you're not an innovator, I think that sums it up. I think you're not only an innovator, but you're documenting it and proving that it is. And really, I think that I'm very impressed with everything that you have talked to me about today. And I'm sure people that are listening, the youngsters who want to be aspiring entrepreneurs or CTOs or inventors or innovators, what advice do you have for them? Somebody young, I know you work with colleges, and what kind of advice would you give them in today's world?
I can tell you what I tell a lot of the engineers that I mentor. So it's advice that I even run through my own mind all the time is just to be who you are.
Yeah,
Don't pretend to be something you're not. You're not Steve Jobs or you're not Bill Gates. You're not,
it could
you
be.
know, until they
Yeah,
become them.
right.
So if that's was the after the comma of
Gotcha. I
the
spoke too
statement
soon.
there, no worries.
Yeah,
But you felt the tension that I wanted to put there, right?
yeah,
Be who you are, be honest, be a human being, treat people with respect, be honest about where you are in life,
yeah.
and always approach things with a set of curiosity
Mm,
that doesn't make you jaded of where you are in your station. If you don't like your station, make your station better, right? Or move to a different station. And that seems almost like platitudes, but I think there's a lot of value in that because if you approach the world with a level of curiosity that causes you to demystify the problem that you're looking at all the way
mm.
down to first principles and then work your way back up. And then to tie in a little bit of analogy there with other industries, you can come up with some pretty creative solutions by mixing something that wasn't meant to be in that space into that space. And then next thing you know, you're being called an innovator by someone that deems you.
I think a very good point, and I think coming from you, I think it makes a lot of difference. I think you have that track record of having done things that are, I think, truly innovative. So, thank you so much, Parker, for your time and spending today with us. And I'm sure there are countless people that can gain from your experience and your background. And again, thanks a lot. And I'm very happy that you're part of the Innovators Playbook podcast today.
Well, Seth, thank you very much. And hopefully I added some value to it. You've been very kind and very gracious. I don't know if I truly deserve it, but at the end of the day, I'm happy to be here and hope your viewers get a lot of good content out of this.
Wonderful. Thank you.